Hello everyone, today I'm going to take you through all of Armani's liquid foundations, and I'm going to begin with Luminous Silk, which is the cult classic, and I'll use this foundation in two different shades, for a yellow tone shade and 5.75, which is more of a tan with an orange lean. So together they create the perfect complexion for my skin tone, and I have been loving this luminous combination, and I do think that it provides the most natural, luminous, truly dewy and glowing complexion possible, especially on my now normal skin. I really do love it, and it photographs beautifully because there is no SPF. So you can use this for outdoor photography in natural light or flash photography indoors in dark settings. Now, I do mix two colors, and I understand that most people won't want to do that. So for those curious, and because I always get questions about MAC equivalents, although I do not use this foundation, I do own it. I do own the Studio Fix Fluid in NC30 as a reference for those who always look for MAC comparisons. And I would say that the 5.75 in Luminous Silk is just a tad lighter than the MAC NC30. So because I mix 4 and 5.75, that should give you a good idea of where I stand in MAC, which is somewhere between NC25 and NC30, but closer toward the NC25 side. Now, I always set Luminous Silk just because I do prefer a more longer lasting foundation, and sometimes I will blot with a Tasha blotting paper. These are my favorites, and I do feel like it takes away the excess oil without removing any of the foundation that I've applied. So I do find that once set with powder, it will last all day, so at least 10 hours. I don't recommend it for oily skin, but if you have combination skin, you can pull this foundation off so long as you use the Hourglass Mineral Veil Primer. And I love this primer for oily skin. I highly recommend you run out and get this if you have oily skin. I've talked about it many a time before, and I still use this in the summer. Now that I have normal skin, I don't necessarily feel the need to use a primer so much. When I had combination skin, this was a lifesaver, and it definitely kept my nose from being super shiny and greasy at the end of the day. Now, someone asked on Twitter how to prevent the foundation from feeling sticky. I do not feel that this foundation is sticky whatsoever, but if that's the case, try applying the foundation with a damp beauty blender sponge. And now another person asked how to maintain the luminous finish of Luminous Silk without looking greasy at the end of the day. And I highly recommend, instead of setting with powder, try using a finishing mist. This is a MAC version. Lancome and a lot of the higher end and designer brands are coming out with their own versions. So just pick whichever one that you like the scent the most of, and whichever one you can tolerate, and that will give your skin an extra boost, and it will refresh the finish of the foundation. So I especially love Luminous Silk because it does not accentuate dryness or flakiness. So if you've had problems with dry patches, then definitely try Luminous Silk. Just make sure you moisturize well and use a primer if you have dry skin. I do recommend Chanel LeBlanc. Armani makes a good primer as well. And now that I have normal skin, I absolutely love and highly recommend Luminous Silk. But just as a warning, if you have oily skin, it may prove too much to handle, even with the Hourglass Veil Mineral Primer. So just keep that in mind when you purchase the foundation. Now moving on to Lasting Silk UV, which is a much better purchase if you do have combination or oily skin. I do find that the Lasting Silk UV has better coverage. The Luminous Silk is very buildable. It could be worn sheer all the way to medium full coverage, whereas Lasting Silk is about light coverage at first with the same amount of pumps to medium full coverage. So I only have to use 2 drops of this for light coverage, and then 3 for medium, 4 for medium full. And that's slowly layered and patted on to troublesome spots like redness around the eye area or nose and cheeks. So in Lasting Silk, I use a combination of 6 and 4.5. This is the original bottle, and this is the revamped bottle. So as you can see, they look a little different. I much prefer the newer version. I love the frosted glass. It's just a much cleaner, sophisticated look. But going back to the foundation itself, I love Lasting Silk because it has a slightly more mattifying finish at first. So it looks a little bit more like real skin as opposed to glowing skin. And that's not to say that a glowing complexion can't look natural, because usually the older we become, the more glow we like and enjoy. But I do think that the Lasting Silk UV does last a little bit longer for the most part. I do find that I get at least an extra hour of wear with this foundation. Now, this one looks great in outdoor photography in natural light, but it will flash back a little in flash photography. So even though it has an SPF of 25, the flashback isn't as bad as you would anticipate. However, it does flash back. So I do recommend sticking to Luminous Silk for indoor photography. Now, the greatest thing about Lasting Silk is that it just looks so natural on the skin. I love that it's able to cover redness. It has that SPF, which is great for day wear. So I think that it's a little less maintenance, and because it provides that extra bit of coverage, those with acne-prone skin will much prefer this one. It does feel slightly creamier than the Luminous Silk, but both are very fluid foundations and easy to spread with the fingertips. Again, if you have oily skin, stick to the primer and powder down your T-zone. That way you'll get the most wear out of your foundation, and you may have to blot midday, but it's worth the extra trouble because the foundation just looks so supremely natural and gorgeous on the skin. Now for Designer Lift, and I probably reach for this foundation the least just because it does have really heavy coverage, but I have this in 4, which is a little light. So if you're NC 25 or lighter, I would say probably like an NC 20 to NC 25, you'll require the 4. It's a little light on me, so today I've mixed it with my Lasting Silk in 6. And they don't mix that well together, so I recommend wearing Designer Lift alone so that you can achieve that really natural skin-like finish with a little extra coverage. So with this, I would say the coverage is about medium to medium full. You can build up to full coverage with this, but it does start to look a little thick on the skin, so I recommend sticking to medium full coverage. This one also has an SPF of 20, and I only have it in the older bottle. I will be purchasing the new shade in the new bottle in 4.5, which should suit my skin perfectly. Now, I do think it's imperative to discuss which kind of skin Designer Lift is best for. If you fall in the spectrum of slightly dry to normal to combination skin, you can wear this foundation so long as you exfoliate and have no dry patches whatsoever. This foundation probably clings to dry patches just as much as the Maestro, which I'll review next. But I still think that if you have slightly dry skin with no dry patches, like no active breakouts that have flaky bits, as long as you moisturize well and use a hydrating primer like Sunday Riley's Tinted Primer, then I highly recommend trying Designer Lift if you're looking for a little bit more coverage. It does have a brightening effect. I love that this is the only Armani foundation that does not oxidize even a little. I love that it doesn't change color, and the coverage alone is good enough where I don't have to apply concealer on my acne spots and my discolorations just because it covers that well. So it's not too noticeable if I don't wear concealer and I use powder on top. So Designer Lift is a good foundation. It's just only ideal for such a narrow range of skin types that it is a little harder to get a match to, especially because the color range is smaller than, for example, Luminous Silk, where you have so many options. Now for the Maestro, and this foundation is an oil-based foundation meant for normal to oily skin. If you have dry skin, run away from this. If a sales associate tries to sell it to you, don't purchase it because it really does not work well on dry skin. So if you have oily skin or combination skin, this is definitely worth a try. It has a very thin consistency that's easy to blend with the fingertips, but if you have dry skin, it will accentuate every nook and cranny. So unless you hydrate extremely well, I don't recommend it for dry skin, even with a hydrating primer. The Maestro comes with a pipette or a little dropper. Out of all the Armani foundations, I do think that Maestro has the best balance of coverage and real skin-like finish. So the two sheer foundations that I'll talk to you about next don't have quite as much coverage as the Maestro. Maestro is actually quite buildable, so you can get up to light medium to medium coverage. and the finish is just so real. A lot of people can't tell that you're wearing foundation, especially if you don't powder. So on very oily skins, I would say powder down the T-zone, but when I had combination to normal skin, I did not have to powder. I just powdered because I wanted extra coverage. Now, I do think the Maestro is worth a shot, but again, if you have dry skin or dry patches, I would not recommend it. Now for the Giorgio Armani face fabric. This particular foundation is a second skin nude makeup, but what I think the best description of this product would be a tinted primer. So because it does feel like a primer, it has a lot of silicone in it, it will even out and smooth the surface of your skin. So your skin will feel baby soft. If you have large pores or acne scarring, this foundation will plump up the skin, you blend it in with your fingertips, and it just gives your skin a really even look. So it has a similar effect as Maestro, except Maestro does dry down a little bit more powdery. The face fabric, on the other hand, doesn't dry down quite as much, but it really does even the surface of the skin a little better. And that's why I don't wear this foundation, because there's just not enough color and coverage for me. So I love the finish. I just wish that there was a little bit more. When I had great skin and I didn't have to deal with these acne scars, I used to love this. And I have purchased this for a lot of my girlfriends who have great skin, and they love it too. And I do think that it's a good foundation. It's just for those who like really, truly natural, undetectable coverage. Again, think of it as a tinted primer. Now, last but not least, I have the Luminescence CC Cream with SPF 35, and this is brand new. I have it in the color 3. I use both in shade 3, although I could mix with 2 in each. I do think that the CC Cream is a great moisturizer, and it has a dewy effect, unlike the semi-matte finish of the face fabric. So I only recommend this for normal to combination skin. If you're very oily, it's going to look too shiny, and if you're very dry, it might not be hydrating enough. But I do love that it has an SPF of 35, so it works great as a makeup primer and sunscreen. So think of this as a tinted sunscreen, and it also has very light coverage. It has a little bit more coverage perhaps than the face fabric, but they're quite comparable. So again, the Luminescence is ideal if you're just looking for a skincare based color product and you just want some hydration benefits and that hint of color to even out your redness, which is what essentially face fabric does as well. So they target redness most, but if you have acne scarring like I do, you're definitely going to have to use more foundation or at least concealer to cover up those blemishes and scars. Now, that's a wrap for my review, and if you have any further questions, please feel free to leave them down below or check out my blog, RAEviewer.com, for more details. And it's a lot easier for me to pack in all the details on the blog so that you can skim through them, and I will post swatches there as well. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye!